I'm Christiane Amanpour in New York. Israel is one of the few countries that really loves Donald Trump. So much so that ahead of next week's election there, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's campaign ads and rhetoric have him practically running on the American president's coattails. Yet, Netanyahu has dominated Israel's politics for a decade, and if he's re-elected, he would become the longest-serving leader in that state's history. He's facing his toughest challenge yet in retired General Benny Gantz and his Blue and White Party. And also, Netanyahu is facing possible criminal indictment, which would be another first for a sitting prime minister. But according to a poll just released, Netanyahu's Likud party has overtaken his rival after weeks of trailing behind. Meanwhile, peace between Israelis and Palestinians looks as far away as ever. That's despite the fact that Jared Kushner, the president's advisor and son-in-law, reportedly says his long-awaited plan would be released after Israel's election. But U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo refused to endorse a two-state solution when questioned on Capitol Hill, and he couldn't say when the U.S. plan would be released.
When do we, or when should we expect the Jared Kushner peace plan that has been talked about and worked about on? And as someone similar to Mr. Price, who's worked on this issue for my whole career, I hope we don't have to wait another 20 years. Could you tell us when we will see the Jared Kushner peace plan?
Yes, ma'am. I think we can say in less than 20 years.
How about being more precise?
I just prefer not to be more precise. I'm very hopeful that we'll present our vision before too long.
Well, let's ask my guest. Danny Danon is Israel's ambassador to the United Nations and joining me here now in the studio in New York. Welcome to the program. You're welcome. So, it is a legitimate question. Congress wants to know. We all want to know. Your region wants to know. When do you think this peace plan will be delivered? You must have been talking to Mr. Kushner and the administration.
We know that the plan is completed. The administration worked a lot on this plan. Intensive visits to the region by Mr. Kushner, Mr. Greenblatt, and we believe that after the elections, they will make it public. We will see the content of the plan. We haven't seen the plan. We will discuss it with our colleagues in Washington, our colleagues here in the UN. We are open-minded, but we will wait. It's only a few weeks. We have elections in a week, so in a few weeks we will see the plan.
Can I get a better answer from you? Is it April 10th, the day after the elections? Is it May? Is it June? What do you think? What do you know?
It's coming. It's coming right after the elections. It's a matter of weeks. So I wouldn't say days, because, you know, we have to count the votes. But I would say a few weeks right after the elections, we will see the plan, and it will be exciting to see the work of the administration.
So there's obviously been, you know, leaks and guessing about what it might be. I mean, there's a whole sort of plan that some people are talking about with all sorts of different parts, like a Rubik's Cube of the regional powers in economic and land transfers and all sorts of things like that. Is that, to your understanding, that it'll involve very intricate swaps of money for land, for jobs, for economic...
We do understand it's going to be a regional plan, so it will not involve only the Israelis and the Palestinians. It would include the neighboring countries, which we welcome. We believe that in any future agreement, we welcome the involvement of Jordan, Egypt, some of the Gulf countries, economical support to the Palestinians. So we are open-minded, but I'm a little bit pessimistic because when I hear the Palestinians, they say we don't want to look at the plan.
Well, right. I was going to say, you say you have all the regionals, but not the Palestinians.
Don't even send it to us. We don't accept the U.S. as mediators. We don't accept the Israelis as partners. So it will be very hard with all the support of the regional players. If you don't have the Palestinians on board, it will be very hard to move forward.
The first question on that is, will it be implemented nonetheless, or do you obviously have to have the Palestinians as the other party to a peace accord?
You cannot implement without the Palestinians.
Right.
You can maybe do other things in the region. We can work with other countries on other projects, but you cannot do anything without the Palestinians. And this week, we celebrated the anniversary of the peace treaty with Egypt. 40 years since the days Camp David, when Menachem Begin signed the treaty with the President Sadat, and it was an amazing moment. We are waiting for the Palestinian Sadat to emerge, to come to Jerusalem, to say enough with the bloodshed, enough with the wars, let's talk peace.
Well, to that end, I'm really glad you mentioned it, because at that time there was an American president who was taken by the whole world as an honest broker, and there was there was Palestinian engagement and there was a give from Israel and from the Palestinians, and rather from Egypt and from Israel, land swaps and all the rest of it. It was a real negotiation. It wasn't just a surrender. So what I want to ask you is this. How does Israel expect the Palestinians to feel like there's a place for them in an honest peace negotiation when the president has done everything he can to enable Israel? From the very beginning, campaign promises to move the embassy, he did, despite the international consensus. Just last week, he tweets that he is totally okay with Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights, again, against the international consensus. In fact, when they tried, in Ronald Reagan's term, he cut off aid. I mean, he was pretty furious when Israel tried to take hold of the Golan Heights. Cutting off aid for Palestinian refugees. I mean, what is there for the Palestinians to feel that they can bring to the table, or that there's going to be a fair peace deal offered?
President Trump is actually exposing the reality to the Palestinians. It's a reality check. The Golan Heights, it's not going anywhere. To whom exactly we should give it back? To the Assad regime, to the Iranians, to ISIS? We know it's a place for stability today in the region, so we welcome this decision. Same with the embassy. We all know that Jerusalem will stay the capital of Israel. You can argue about East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem. For us, it is one united Jerusalem. But I have heard other countries acknowledge the same. Say we can move our embassies to some part of Jerusalem. So the president was bold, was brave, and took that strong decision. So I think the Palestinians should understand that we will continue to be there. It is about time that they will face reality, recognize Israel as a Jewish democracy, recognize our presence, and speak with us directly about the future.
I certainly understand from your perspective and from your government's perspective, although it's kind of different from the perspective of previous Israeli governments and their view of a two-state solution with Jerusalem shared. I guess I want to ask you this. Will you stop at the Golan Heights, or will Israel feel that what many of Prime Minister Netanyahu's 28 coalition members and lawmakers in his party, etc., what they want is actually an annexation of parts of the West Bank, either the whole of the West Bank, but they're saying Area C, which is currently also occupied by Israel. Is that the next step on this agenda?
So first we will wait to see the plan of the president. We will respect it and we will try to work with him about that. If you ask me about the future, we will wait for the new government. My position that we should not support unilateral actions. We tried it in the past. We did it with Gaza. And I want to remind everybody, we pulled out, Prime Minister Sharon pulled out from Gaza completely 14 years ago, and Hamas took over. So it's not always the best thing to do is to take unilateral actions. I think we should have a dialogue, even if it means that we will have to wait until somebody else will step in, will become the leader of the Palestinians, will recognize us, and will speak with us.
I mean, you say that, but President Mohammed Abbas does recognize you, does believe in being a peace partner. Things have been, quite disrupted over the last several months. But most Israelis, including, fairly conservative Israeli former prime ministers, believe that he is the only partner for peace, because otherwise, who do you have? Hamas? But anyway, let's move on. Do you believe? Are you also sort of, I don't know, going squishy on the two-state solution, just as Secretary of State Pompeo couldn't say that that was still the American position?
I believe that we should enter the room and negotiate. And what the Palestinians want, they want to know exactly what will be the outcome before entering the negotiating room. It doesn't work that way. If you want to negotiate, come, like the Prime Minister said.
It's been the central part of international consensus since Oslo. So do you still believe
Prime Minister Netanyahu said very directly that he is willing to negotiate everything. That was a strong statement from the Prime Minister. He said, I'm willing to negotiate everything, but let's sit down and negotiate in Ramallah, in Washington, in Tel Aviv. It's not happening. Abbas, he doesn't lead the Palestinians to peace. He's inciting, he's paying salaries to convicted terrorists, 7%. Christiana, from the budget of the Palestinians,
we'll get that perspective. I know that you always say that.
To families of murderers.
We'll get that perspective
That's
from
horrible.
our Palestinian guest, and we'll ask her about that. But Mahmoud Abbas, my mistake, Mahmoud Abbas is the only partner that you have on the Palestinian side. Can I ask you another bigger question? And this goes to the heart of Prime Minister Netanyahu. I mean, what are we meant to think when he goes into an alliance with an openly anti-Arab racist party called Jewish Power? What is the world meant to think? What are the Palestinians meant to think? What are your Arab partners meant to think? Even AIPAC, who stands shoulder to shoulder with Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Likud government and Israel, condemned this move. Why does he have to do something like that?
So we should look at the exact facts. We are a strong democracy. We allow everybody to run for the Knesset, our parliament. Radicals from left to right.
But he doesn't have to go into accommodation with them. That's the question I have for you.
So they are not part of the Likud party. They are running by themselves. And by the way, when I was in the Knesset for many years, and I heard Arab MKs speaking against Israel, supporting Hezbollah, supporting Hamas, I was furious. But we respected the democracy. So the same way we allow radicals
but is
from
that
the
a
other
decent
side.
partnership for your Prime Minister?
And I want to remind you that
No, seriously, is it a decent
the
partnership?
Prime Minister is not involved with that party. He is not inviting them to join his coalition. And we will wait. In a week, he will form a government. I don't know what the results, but the way it looks that he will win the elections and will form another government. And in the last 13 years, he never put this party or those individuals as part of his government.
And finally, I guess, what we also said and what he's going to be facing is this possible criminal indictment on all these charges. That'll be a first. It hasn't happened to a sitting Israeli prime minister. Are we going to see, I mean, what will happen if he's indicted? What's the mechanism afterwards? Does he continue as prime minister? Does he stand trial? Does he go to jail? What happens?
So first, I hope he will not be indicted. As a friend of the prime minister and as a citizen of Israel, we have a rule of law. And the prime minister, like every other citizen, he's not indicted yet. He has to go through a hearing before the Attorney General. It will take a few months. And then the Attorney General will decide whether to indict him or not. If he's being indicted, according to the law, he can stay the Prime Minister. Maybe his coalition member will not allow it or the public will not allow it. But according to the law, we never tried it.
So that's interesting.
According to the law, he can stay the Prime Minister while he's being indicted.
But you say maybe his coalition won't, maybe the public won't. What does that mean?
Well, we haven't have history dealing with such a scenario, and I hope it will not be the case also with the Prime Minister. But if you look at the law, it says specifically that the Prime Minister can stay in power even if he's indicted.
But you're the one who just raised a possibility that he might have to bear the consequences.
So now in the campaign, you know, people who are against the Prime Minister, they raise that scenario. What will happen if he will be indicted? How can he govern while he's going to court? It is part of the debate, and I think the people in Israel will have to go next Tuesday and choose and vote and decide what they think about that. And that's the strength of our democracy. In the UN, I speak with many of my colleagues. They know the results of the elections in their countries before. We do not. We are the only democracy in the Middle East that it is real. People are voting, and we govern according to the results.
There is a lot to look out for next week.
Absolutely, it's exciting.
UN Ambassador Danny Danon, thank you very much
indeed.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. So let's hear now from the Palestinian side. Diana Boutou is a human rights lawyer, and she joins me from Haifa. You just heard Ambassador Danny Danon talk about a whole number of questions and issues that are on the table. I guess, let me ask you what you think are the likelihood, first and foremost, of being able to come to the table under the long-awaited Jared Kushner peace plan.
Well, to begin with, I actually don't think there really is a plan. I think what we're seeing right now is the implementation of Trump's wishes and Trump's desires, which are in effect Netanyahu's wishes and Netanyahu's desires. We've seen everything from the declaration that Jerusalem is Israel's capital, the movement of the embassy, paring down in terms of refugees, cutting off of aid to UNRWA. We've seen that they've shut down the office of the PLO in the United States. And we've even seen that the United States is supporting the annexation of the Golan Heights. These are all items that have been on Israel's wish list for quite some time. And what the Trump administration is doing is handing this over to the Netanyahu administration. So I actually don't see that there's anything that is going to be left for there to be any discussion about, given the state what has been done already.
Diana, I put this to the ambassador, but it's really to put to you. Do the Palestinians, does the leadership and the people believe that these two situations, the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem, the approval of Israel's unilateral annexation of the Golan Heights, despite international law, do you all feel that the next inevitable step will be the U.S. approving the annexation of parts of the West Bank, parts of Area C, as it's known?
Most definitely. And we've already seen that since the Trump declaration that happened last week, that a number of Israeli politicians have come forward and said that this is the next natural step, and in fact have been bragging about what a great recognition this is, and how the changing of international law is working in their favor. So this is obviously of deep concern, but it shouldn't just be of concern to Palestinians. This should be of concern to everybody around the world. This attempt to violate and to acknowledge or to make legal what is otherwise illegal is going down the path of changing the world's order. Next thing we know, that it'll be allowed for Crimea to be annexed. We will then see that settlements will be allowed to be legal. And what it does is that it changes international order. And this is why it's so dangerous. And this is why Palestinians have been saying outright, this isn't an honest broker. This is somebody who is shoulder to shoulder working with Israel, being President Trump.
Can I just read to that end, one of the long-time experienced Arab negotiators was the former Jordanian Foreign Minister Marwan Mouasha, and he actually has recently told the Financial Times, while no one in the Arab world expected the U.S. to be an honest broker, they still expected the U.S. to lead a process that would at least result in the end of the occupation and a viable Palestinian state. Now, all of that seems out of the door. The U.S. has lost all respect in the Arab world. Nobody in the Arab world is going to accept this. Nobody. I mean, that is quite strident from a quite mild-mannered, experienced world diplomat. But is that what you're feeling, not just from the Palestinians, but from Arab neighbors as well?
Yes, most definitely. This is all that Palestinians have been demanding for the past 50 years, is that they want their freedom and only their freedom. And yet when we see that administration after administration is not only not giving us our freedom, but rewarding Israel for violating international law, it says a lot about where the U.S. is and what the U.S. vision is for this region. I think that what we need to do is we need to step back and we need to start implementing international law. People like Netanyahu should not be rewarded with more and more land. They should actually be sanctioned. And this is why the growing boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign is picking up so swiftly, because people are seeing that Israel is getting all of the carrots and Palestinians are getting the sticks. And this isn't the way that the international system should be working.
Diana, can I just put to you what Ambassador Danon said to me? As you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu's rhetoric and his government's rhetoric is that we don't have a partner for peace, that Mahmoud Abbas does not represent the Palestinians, and that furthermore, he gives tens of billions or millions of dollars to what they call terrorists. How do you answer that, and how much of that should worry you and should worry the leadership? Should there be a change in how the budget and those kinds of funds are allocated if that is the case?
Well, I think it's first important to step back and look at who Prime Minister Netanyahu is and what his position has been. Since he's taken office, he has allowed the Israeli settlement industry to soar. There have been more settlements that have been put up in his time than in any other time that preceded him. He's a man who has never believed in Palestinian freedom. And as you heard from Mr. Danon and other people who have been part of the Likud party and who are currently part of the Likud party, they cannot even utter the words Palestinian freedom or much less Palestinian state. So we're talking about people who are ideologically opposed to Palestinian freedom. And this is what the problem is that we keep putting up on a pedestal these individuals rather than isolating them and ostracizing them. We should be focusing on Israel and its continued occupation, its continued denial of freedom, rather than focusing on who the Palestinian leadership is. I'm not a fan of this leadership, but it's for us to be choosing. It's not for Israel to be choosing our leaders.
And just briefly, to answer that question that they always say, and that is where these funds from the Palestinian Authority are being allocated.
In terms of the funds of the Palestinian Authority, I'm not part of the Palestinian government, so I can't speak definitively to this. What I can say from the research that I've done on this is that the vast majority of money that they claim is being allocated to families is actually not. A lot of it is going to pay the legal fees of individuals, and a lot of money is going into actually subsidize the Israeli prison system. I don't know the specifics about the budget itself, so I can't really speak definitively to that since I'm not part of the government.
And I guess finally, you said you're not a fan of this Palestinian leadership. And you, I think, are not a fan of the two-state solution. So where do you think this is headed now? I mean, you are a human rights lawyer. You do a lot of work on this issue politically and in terms of human rights. Where is this headed? I mean, are all the places or the pieces in place for a one-state solution?
The pieces are most certainly in place for a one-state solution. The big issue that we need to start addressing is this ideology of Jewish supremacy that people like Danon and people like Netanyahu have, and begin to address that. And I think that once the world begins to recognize that the two-state solution is not only dead, but it doesn't really make much sense, and start putting into place measures to have one person, one vote, where everybody is equal, irrespective of religion, I think that this is going to be the much better, much more workable solution, rather than simply trying to cut off parts of Palestinian territory, throw a little bit of land the way of Palestinians and say, this is all you get because you were kicked out of your homeland in 1948. I think this is the way that we should be working towards one person, one vote, one state.
It's going to be really interesting to see how this particular aspect plays out after these upcoming elections in Israel. Dan Buttu, thank you so much for joining me.